This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in everybody to this week's episode of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon, cause some call the events of the last weekend the perfect Detroit sports weekend. Now granted, all of you are offending the DOC by just blatantly disregarding the fact that Michigan State lost. But I watched that game. I watched the Spartans game. I was heartbroken. But I will stick to your guys' narrative. It was a perfect sports weekend with the Tigers winning, with the Wolverines upsetting and playing very well against the Trojans. The Lions won. Everybody's excited. The Tigers have just made an unbelievable push. This past weekend, I'm not going to lie, was very fun. Saturday was great. Got to watch a lot of college football and then Michigan State. But I did get to learn a little bit more about the red bandana game at Boston College. In 20 years, I never heard of that. And I got to learn a little bit more about the reasoning behind the game and all the passion and the individual and the tie to 9/11. So I learned a lot about Boston College and their program. So, okay, I'll let it slide. But let's start with Michigan. They were, by all accounts, a lot of people were not respecting Michigan at home against USC. And despite their quarterback throwing for less than 35 yards, they were able to play Big Ten football and earn a lot of respect for finding a gritty, nasty way to win. It wasn't exactly entertaining because it was all running, but at the same token, that's Michigan football. And my biggest takeaway is, yeah, you got a big issue at quarterback, but USC was not ready for Big Ten football. Big Ten football is smash mouth, offensive line play, defensive line play, and the opportunities that Michigan had to run the football was pretty special. And it was nice to see them bully another team. And it was wild that Khalil Mullins was able to run for those, Khalil Mullins was able to run for those touchdowns. He just did his thing and burst onto the scene, and Michigan got a win. So I'm curious, did they change your mind at all with that kind of performance? Or are you saying, man, if the Wolverines actually had a quarterback, that game might not have even been in question. It might have even been a blowout.
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. So here's the thing, right? I use this platform with you, and I generally shit on Michigan. I'm a big Michigan fan, but I shit on Michigan. I will call them out. I will say when they did wrong. I will say when they did bad, when they played poor, and then I will praise them when they did great. Look, I was so excited watching this game because going into it, I shit all over Michigan. I said USC was going to blow them out, was going to crush them. I couldn't have been more wrong. That first half was awesome to watch. Michigan pushed USC all around the field, right? Now, it got a little bit tricky in the third, and you've seen some of the stuff that we've talked about, right? You've seen some of those all-out blitzes. You've seen some of those blitz packages that leave big vacant holes where that defense is going to get picked apart. That defense has 3 dudes on it that are going to be absolute studs at the next level. That's crazy to say, right? Like, you have 3 guys on that defense that should go in the first 2 rounds of this next upcoming NFL draft. Like, that is talent, right? And still, because of the scheme that you run, you're still going to be vulnerable and you're still going to get picked apart by good quarterbacks, good wide receivers, and good running backs. It's just the way it is, right? It's one of those things where you're going to be giving a lot to get some. So it's what Wink Martindale runs. It's how it's going to be. It's what it is. They ended up figuring it out in the fourth quarter. I was so pumped that final drive. I was holding my baby. I was teaching her about bully ball. I was telling her hat on a hat, and what you do is you give the best guy on the field the ball, and that's Khalil Mullins. Khalil Mullins is a man. That is a stud. This dude can sit there and truck over 4, 5, 6 guys, carry them with him. He can also find a seam, hit that seam, and take it 63 yards. That guy is a beast. That guy is your offense right now because you do not have a quarterback. So no, this victory, as big of a win as it was, and as awesome as it was, and as much fun as I had watching that, I don't know if I've been this happy. Even when they won the national championship, I was excited and I was happy. But I had to put it all into perspective because there was all the stuff with the cheating allegations going on. So I didn't really enjoy it as much as I probably should. This game, look, I know it's early in the season. I get it's a regular season game. It's a conference game. I understand all of that. I was so juiced up with this game. I was so pumped up because going into it, I had little expectation that they were going to be able to pull out the win. I had no anticipation, no thoughts, no foresight that they were going to win this game. And they did. And I was pumped, and it came down to that final drive, and it was really, really cool to watch, and it was really cool to experience. But the fact that you don't have a quarterback is a problem. You basically have two running backs in your backfield at all times, and then you've got some wide receivers who aren't going to get the football. One of your best offensive weapons is your tight end, and he's banged up. So, no, this does not change my expectations. This does not change my point of view of this team. What this did do is it showed a way for Michigan to win games. I don't think you're going to win games against better teams doing this, but this does show you a way where you can sit there and scratch out 8 victories. I don't know if this will be a 9-win team. I'm looking at Penn State right now. I think Penn State might have your number. James Franklin's a boob of a coach, but they've got quite a bit of talent. He seems to always crumble when he plays Michigan. I can't figure it out. He's like, it's all a mental thing with him. I think Ohio State's going to run a train on you and is going to truck you. Oregon's going to be interesting because Oregon is not the team that we thought Oregon was going to be. So that will be an interesting game. I think the game against Michigan State right now, to me, it feels like a bit of a coin flip. At Michigan State, if they can figure out some consistency at quarterback and get this offense going, Michigan State's going to be a problem. Their defense is pretty good. Their offense has struggled at times this year. There are times where they look incredibly well, and there are other times where you're just kind of scratching your head and like, man, if you were going up against anybody decent, that would have been another interception. So yeah, I think Michigan has a bit of a tough road ahead of it with this season because you have a quarterback who has to get more dynamic. He has to be able to complete passes. He has to be able to help move the ball downfield because the way I see this right now, if you get stopped on first and second down and you're put into a third and long situation, you kind of need to pray that you're going to hit that. It becomes difficult when you're forcing your quarterback, who's actually a running back, to say, "Hey, look, we need 7 yards. Can you get the ball, 7 yards down the field?" And he can't necessarily throw a pass. So you're going to have some issues. If he can become more dynamic and he can become a better passer and he can learn quickly on how to play the role of quarterback when it comes to throwing the football, I think this team will have a much higher ceiling. But right now, my expectations are the same. You're completely limited at quarterback. The running back is your healthiest and your best weapon right now. That offensive line has figured it out quickly. It only took a couple of games. That offensive line looks very good. And your defense is going to carry you. Your defense is going to be what you make your bread and butter on. So we'll see what happens, but I think a lot of this falls at the feet of your quarterback and the quarterback play. But it was a fun game to watch, man. I was pretty pumped. I was just as pumped about that Michigan game as I have been about the Tigers. I am in full Tiger playoff mode right now. Ooh. I am every day watching the stats. I am every day watching the standings. I am sitting there with my baby girl, and they move the game from 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and me and her are sitting at the kitchen island, and I'm feeding her, and we're listening to the Tigers game. Listen to Dan Dickerson break it down for us, and I'm getting pumped, and I find myself fist pumping as they're getting wins. And I think it has to lead to this question. They're so close. The season is almost over. I think right now they are in the second wild card spot. I honestly believe that they have a legit shot to get that first wild card spot and possibly host a playoff game. A lot of things have to go right, and things are going to have to work out for them, but I think they have a chance to do it. I want to know what your confidence level is that they actually get this thing done. They get into the playoffs, but not only get into the playoffs, can capture that 4th seed and host that first wild card series.
Yeah, it's crazy because you have to root against the Twins now, and then you got to cheer for them against the Orioles. So it's crazy to think about how it's going to shake out. You just got to win games. And look, I just think that to summarize the season, I predicted the team would have 88 wins. You had a feeling like this baseball team could eventually find some talent and move forward. But the biggest problem, the biggest reason for skepticism, and a reason for hate was the fact that you had dead weight in Javier Baez, and there was no indication that the team was going to change it because of how much money they were paying him. So for all the people that are like, oh, you jumped off the bandwagon and all the we stayed loyal crew, listen, nobody in their right mind would support a team that has an automatic out, a negative player on the team. Basically, a negative WAR means that you or I could go out there and it would be no different. A negative WAR, meaning that he has no impact on the team and he actually hurts the team. And we made jokes about it, and I don't, feel great about it, but when he first hurt his back several months ago, I said, just for his own health and sanity, he probably should take 6 months off. And a lot of people joked with that and liked it. And then it finally ended up happening where Javier Baez was taken out of this lineup. You bring in youthful injection of Parker Meadows. You have Riley Green. You have Colt Keith, Spencer Torkelson, who had a stint in the minors and come back and is contributing. But what's been special is the craziness with the pitching defies logic in regards to the fact that the guys that are in the bullpen were kind of just average, regular folks in the minors, and they're coming out here looking like they're world beaters and are unhittable. So we'll take it, of course. And so the blessing of being able to watch this baseball team is they're far more interesting. And I've checked into a lot more games. Before, when they were losing, you check into the box score, you watch 3-4 innings, and you just get bored to death because the offense was so bad. Remember the early narrative? This offense was atrocious. It would put even the most energetic person to sleep. And now they turned it around. They took the holes out of the lineup. And I do think, I agree with a lot of people, it's youthful ignorance. They're just going out there and playing baseball. And credit to A.J. Hinch for doing what he's doing. And yeah, there's a chance, but I do think that it's most likely going to be on the road 3 games against Houston or Baltimore. And fine, you'll take it. You know why you'll take it, cuz? Because Mr. Tariq Skubal has taken his game up a notch, and it has been fun to watch. How impressed have you been with Skubal? Because it's fun now. We can actually talk about it. You can position yourself to say, okay, maybe we can get him in, to the first game here. Maybe if you win some games, you don't have to use them before the playoffs and have an opportunity. But right now, as we sit, it's about 85% that the Tigers are going to win, partly due to their success, but also the historic choke job, gag job that the Twins are doing. They just got close to the postseason, and they just could not – their nuts shriveled up. And it's great to see somebody else's nuts shrivel up because we've been used to seeing Detroit teams shrink under pressure. So, hell yeah, this has been great. And I'll be honest, cuz, I think you owe me some credit because I said, hey, cuz, let's still talk about these Tigers. Mm-hmm. They're kind of doing some things.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
We are the Detroit Sports Podcast. We can't just dismiss them as garbage. It is true.
I wrote them off.
Yeah, baseball is 162 long ass games. Like to be honest, I wouldn't wish my worst enemy to cover a beat for a Major League Baseball team. That's long. You know how many narratives you got to go through. You know how many things you got to pay attention to. All the stuff you got to pay attention to before the game, during the game, after the game, rain delays. Oh my God. I just go to 5 games a year, sit in the press box, enjoy the team and watch them from home. And I enjoy watching this baseball team right now. It's good right now. Hey, Scott Harris went on a local podcast. He's they got to winning. He's like, I'm going to go on the Athletics podcast. Good for you. And there's excitement. There's buzz. And it's fun to be a part of. It's new. It's refreshing. And whatever happens, if you get in, it's gravy, baby. And it's a fun opportunity for this Tigers team. They brought back some passion to this Detroit fan base. And cuz the interest level on Twitter is creeping up there to the level of, I think people right now, because it's so early in the Lions season, the interest level in town is very high for this team.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely high. This is something we haven't seen in years. At least a decade now? Well, when was the last time they were relevant? Was it like 2012? Maybe God. 2014. So yeah, it's been about a decade now since this team has been relevant in baseball. And look, they're doing something historic. This is something that is unprecedented. Like I said, I wrote this team off probably 3 months ago. I was incredibly frustrated with this team. I was frustrated with the moves that Scott Harris made. I was frustrated with the penny pinching by Chris Ilitch. I was flabbergasted that when you have a talent like Tarik Skubal, you're not able to put more around him. And look, he has been pitching out of his mind. The guy is an absolute unit for sure.
Cause real fast. The last time the Tigers were in the playoffs, they got swept 3-0 by Baltimore. You remember when that was? 2014, when we just got the podcast into gear. Remember we broke down that series and how awful Ausmus was as a manager?
Yes.
And what the hell they were doing? Cause literally we were talking about the playoffs with baseball around episode 40 of our podcast. And
That's
right
crazy.
now we are at episode, what are we at? 576, 577? It's crazy.
582.
582. 500. Yeah, 550 episodes we have talked about baseball in a sense that's different than this. So that's crazy, man. That's just, it's a long time.
I mean, that's a great way to put it in perspective at how bad this team has been and why there's such a huge interest level with it right now, because you haven't had it for so long. You don't necessarily know what playoff baseball is. Like, there's a whole generation of kids that have no idea what playoff baseball is. Like your nephew, who you watch a ton of games with.
Yeah.
I don't think he can remember. I know he's a little bit older now, but I don't think he can remember the last time this team was in the playoffs. So, I mean, that just goes to show you kind of where this team's at and what they're doing and why it's so special. And I think the thing, too, that makes it so special is they're doing it in a very unconventional way. They really only have two pitchers right now. It's Tarik Skubal, and then it's insert other guy, and then it's okay, well, who's going out of the bullpen today? Who's going to be able to give us 3 innings, and then who's going to be able to give us 2 innings, and who's going to be able to help get us through the first half of the game? And that's kind of how they're doing it. It is a very interesting way to manage and to control a baseball game and to control your bullpen. And I think a lot of credit has to be given to AJ Hinch. He's done a fantastic job with, look, I don't care if this team gets to a World Series. I will tell you forever and a day that Scott Harris and Chris Ilitch really hamstrung this team and really hamstrung what this team could have been by not making more moves in the offseason or not making bigger moves in the offseason. I think they also hamstrung this team by putting Javi Baez on this team. That guy was a walking out. So you hurt this team, and this team has been able to overcome and succeed in spite of the general manager and the owner. And a lot of it falls at the feet of the coach and the manager in AJ Hinch, who's done, I think, a fantastic job. And another thing that I don't think we've talked about enough, a lot of these guys aren't Scott Harris guys.
Yeah.
We used to rip Al Avila to shreds on this show. A lot of these guys are Al Avila guys. Maybe Al Avila knew something we didn't know. I don't know. Al Avila was the shits at trades, but the thing that I don't think a lot of people are realizing is most of these guys who are in these spots right now, like Tarik Skubal is an Al Avila guy. A lot of the guys on this roster, Riley Green, that's an Al Avila guy. There are guys on this roster that are Al Avila guys. Now look, Javi Baez is an Al Avila guy. So there are things that you can totally hold against him, but the core of this team that's getting this job done are not Scott Harris guys, not Chris Ilitch guys. These are Al Avila guys. And I think at a certain point you kind of have to tip your cap to the old general manager. I think more of a tip of the cap goes to the actual manager who's working with these guys day in, day out and getting this job done and coaching in an unorthodox way to help this team win. And I think it's a lot of fun to watch, and I think it's exciting. Do you think this team is able to secure that top wild card spot, or do you think they'll probably end up in 5th or 6th?
I think they'll end up going on the road. I just think that,
okay.
And yeah, you do need a little bit of luck. You do need a little bit of Minnesota to kind of do some things. And I just think that Baltimore could hold on to it. And, hey, the climb would be great if you are able to host. Oh, my God, it'd be almost an opportunity to win, not only to get in, but to win. For me, because of the low expectations going in, just getting to whoever you face in the wild card would be a blessing. Whatever, win or lose. It's tough because, it's a little bit weird that they want the wild card series to end fast so the team that's ahead gets all 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's also some numbers behind it in that well over 65% of the games, since they've done it this way, 65 to 70% of teams that have been on the road have won the series. So it's been crazy.
There's less pressure. I feel like to host it, there's a ton of pressure.
Yes. So it's so different to look at it from that perspective. But the Tigers have done a good thing. They're playing well, key hits. You look at it from the perspective of, okay, again, we'll say it again. We'll reiterate it. Now that they've established that they can win games, now the investment has to come in the offseason to add a couple more bats, up the salary about $50 million, and let's go. And to me, the number one thing is I don't want to see Javier Baez wear a Detroit Tigers uniform ever again. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you are bought out.
Cut him a check, get him to go someplace else, anywhere else. It doesn't matter.
He's a vibe killer, and that's just the way it's been. That's what he did. He killed the vibe, and now it's back. And that's why everybody's all aboard the train. They're excited, and everybody's, really looking to pay attention deeply to what this team is doing. And it's a good sign. It's good for Detroit sports. It's good for us. And yes, it is good for my nephew. He actually, it was great. He was at Lakeside Mall Monday afternoon, and it was an off day for the Tigers, and he meets, I'll send you the photo. He met Jake Rogers. Nothing but gracious. Yeah, very cool. Nothing but gracious, good guy. Got to tell him, hey, hope you guys make the postseason. He's a big fan, and he was nothing but super nice, rocking his porn stash. And low key, he's been a big factor into what's going on with the pitchers, with the season that he's had.
He's been calling great games.
Calling excellent games, and I'm so glad that you get to watch the games with your daughter and get that vibe in her too. So it's fun. It's great to be able to talk about baseball and not just brush past all the issues, and they're not irrelevant. So that's good. And Detroit supports effort, and I think the youthful ignorance is so great. Like, they don't know what the hell they're doing because it makes no logical sense.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah, they make no logical sense. Just go out there and win games. And luckily, the schedule shook out where they're playing Tampa and the White Sox. So there's going to be a lot of chances to win. I might have a small chance if they win out, small chance to kind of be perfect on my prediction with 88 wins. They're probably going to land on 86, 87. But, hey, man, it's a great time for everybody involved with Detroit sports and the Detroit Tigers. And to continue the great sports weekend that we just went through. Look, real fast about Michigan State. Aiden Childs cost the Spartans the game. It was a heartbreak. I love the 7-8 minute drive. And then when Childs threw the ball into the end zone and the running back dropped it, my head, because it was tough because I actually felt a physical depression. My head went down, and I knew. I was like, okay, they're not going to win this game. I knew it right away. And my head was down. I watched it, and the game ended. They lost, and I felt gross. I was like, man, am I sick? Something wrong with me? Like, I felt gross. I was like, okay. You tell yourself, okay, you're not an athlete. You're just a fan. You've been through this before, but you just felt like, best way to describe it with my words, you just felt like this gross, disgusting feeling of, I've seen this game so many times. Being a Lions fan, being a Spartan fan, you had the game won. Childs threw the ball. It was in the guy's hand. Maybe it was divine intervention because of the purpose of the red bandana game. I don't know, but the game was there in the grasp of the Spartans. They get the ball back late, and then Childs was making the throws to the tight end. It looked pretty, and then he went and played hero ball. So I'm going to bring you guys down to my sad level for this next 60 seconds. My head was down. The doc was depressed. I was sitting there going, this hurts. It physically hurt. It was like pain of like, another win was taken from the Spartans. They didn't play well enough in regards to a lot of turnovers and things like that. It was so sad to just watch that. My head was down. It took me like 10 minutes to just pick my head up. But look, Childs is young. He's going to learn. I think that not having Nick Marsh probably should have had my expectations lower, but they played good enough to just survive and be in the game. But man, it felt like Childs, you went for it too soon. You just whipped it out too soon, man. You had to wait, and it just didn't work out. So, all right, I don't want to bum anybody out anymore, but that's how I felt. I was truly happy this weekend, except for the final 15 minutes of the Spartans game. I was heartbroken. So it was not a perfect weekend for everybody, but a lot of good news for Detroit fans, especially those that watched the Lions. They went out there and they won a game in which no scoring in the second half from the Lions. Their defense was a situation which Dan Campbell was able to say, hey, let's punt. It's 4th and 1. You don't have to go for it. Let's try to draw them offside and let's just call a timeout and punt. Let's just keep doing that because our defense is playing well. And Jack Fox keeps pinning them deep. Jack Fox, the NFC Special Teams Player of the Week with these high, beautiful punts, kept making it so that they kept getting the ball at the 15, at the 14, behind the 20-yard line, and the defense played well. It was a unbelievably fun game to watch from the perspective of the defense because after Maserati Marv got his shit going in the first half, nothing really to speak of in the second half, and they contained Kyler Murray. They were physical, and it was a fun performance to watch. What lesson did you learn from the Lions? Of course, we're going to talk about the injuries and how scared and nervous we are, but overall, what lesson did you learn? What did you learn about your Detroit Lions team after the 20-13 victory on the road against the Arizona Cardinals?
We have a legit defense.
Yes.
You have a defense that can travel, that will travel, and a defense that if the offense or the special teams aren't there or if things just aren't going well, your defense will be able to pick you up, and your defense is not going to cost you games, and your defense, this isn't a defense that you're going to have to win in spite of. This is a defense that you are going to win because of. And to me, that is what stood out. I think over the course of the last 3 games that this team has played, I've been so impressed by what I've seen basically year on year from this defense. This defense is light years ahead of what it was last year, and this defense is now a legit strength of this team. I think you are getting a ton of pressure up front from guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Levi Onwuzurike, Aleem McNeil. You're getting pressure and you're getting good coverage from the linebacking core. And I think that secondary, that revamped secondary, looks really, really good. Now, all those things being said, there are some things that we kind of have to look at a little bit. And specifically, you've got a rookie cornerback in Terrion Arnold. And to me, it feels a little ticky-tack with some of the calls that are getting called on him. But there are a ton of pass interference penalties that are being called against him. And I'll be honest with you, every time that there was a deep ball thrown, I sat there and my butthole shriveled up a little bit and I clenched a little bit tight because I kept waiting for a flag to come out. It would be like 3rd and long and there'd be a pass and it'd be in Terrion Arnold's direction and I'm just like, okay, where's the flag? Where's the flag? You're just waiting. And you're like, okay, cool. No flag. We can move on. Held them 4th down. They got a punt. Let's go. But I think there has to be a little bit of concern about these pass interference penalties that are starting to really rack up on this young cornerback. Now, I think some of this has to do with him being a rookie and him being brand new in the league, but it is becoming a thing where each and every week you can account on at least 1 or 2 pass interference penalties against him. How concerned are you with this aspect of his game? This press, this pressure, this bump and run, this being up in the wide receiver's chest, and sometimes it just not working out, and there's going to be a penalty assessed. Where are you at with this? Because as this game wore on, I was nervous. Early on, I was frustrated by it because, like I said, some of them felt a little ticky-tack. And I think maybe eventually he gets the respect he's due, but I think this year's going to be a bit of a learning curve. And I say all this, I'm still incredibly impressed with him. He is a rookie cornerback. These guys take a season or 2 to develop. They don't usually hit their stride until sometime around week 12, week 13, week 14 later in the season. And I think what you're seeing out of him is great play. There are a ton of cornerbacks in the league that you would take this from every day of the week. I think he is playing exceptionally well right now. but I think the pass interference penalties are becoming a bit of a thing.
Yeah, and it's because simply when you play in college, you get away with a little bit more with your hands. You can kind of be a little bit more handsy and grabby and stuff like that. But in the NFL, it's all toss the flag. And he's the victim of some ticky-tack calls, no doubt about it. But the good thing is that the moment that our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, because we saw it, he was struggling a little bit. He was playing off a little bit. Harrison was getting some. He was getting targeted by Kyler Murray. I said, okay, if Arnold keeps up this play and gets targeted this much, and at this point, when you look at the numbers, the ratio of the targets his way versus the incompletions is not great. A lot of the passes going his way are getting completed. So we're not just making it up. The numbers dictated that, okay, he was giving up, receptions. So the moment I tweeted that, he started playing better. In the second half, he's now in the hip pocket of Marvin Harrison, and the coverage was better. And for Terrion Arnold, he's still learning, zone coverages, the way in which opposition tries to beat it with calls. So he's still learning. So it's a concern because of the fact that it's resulting in big chunks of penalties. And that's always going to be impactful. But you understand that, look, man, if you watch a lot of NFL football, these cornerbacks, and we've said it 1,000 times now, friends do not let friends play cornerback. That position's brutal, man. I mean, you just can't. It's physiologically also tough too, because the wide receivers are so precise and can cut that any cushion that you give, the guy can just boom stop and the ball's there. That's how fast these quarterbacks can throw the ball that are pocket passers. So it's super tough. But what's happening, which is good with the Lions, is they're not giving up touchdowns. They're tackling a little bit better, and they're playing defense within the parameters of give up as much shit as you want between the 20s, which every team is doing. But when it's time to, force a turnover or force a clamping down, not give up touchdowns, they're able to execute. And
what's been real
great.
impressive?
What's that?
It not just to play on the field. I think the coaching. I think this is a monumental step forward that we're seeing out of Aaron Glenn. The ability to make these adjustments and then individually coach these players to get the best out of them after things like what you just accounted for with Terrion Arnold, where he was getting a little bit eaten alive by Marvin Harrison Jr., where he was playing a little bit off. He comes back that second half, and he's a better player. And you don't necessarily have to worry so much about those pass interference calls. You didn't see any in the second half. It's the ability to get through to the players and then make the correct corrections at halftime to put your team in better spots. I think you're seeing Aaron Glenn take that next step in his evolution as a coach, and I think it's awesome to see.
Yeah, it is. And Kirby Joseph, look, I think that's what we said last time when we talked, and on the Lions on SI podcast too, which is, hey, Kirby Joseph, those interceptions are huge. In a game that's tight defensively. Any opportunity you get to have an extra possession or to stop the momentum of the other team is spectacular. And cause part of it too, my sister's husband Anthony went out there. He has family members that live in Arizona, so he was like, oh my God. He sent videos, which I posted on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. The chants, the all blue, the crowd. Look, everyone says it, and Logan told me too. He's like, John, you do realize that the Red Wing fans go out there too. Arizona is like Detroit West. You know what I mean? I'm
it's like Florida's
okay.
Detroit South.
Yeah, I get it. I'm like, but it's still cool to see. Those tickets are expensive, and I still will give credit for the Lions fans to go out there and celebrate and have a good time. Jared Goff said it was probably the best blue out he's ever seen. Felt like it was a home game. The fan base of Detroit is sick and rabid. And that is a fun trip if you're going to take one trip a year to go to Arizona, because I thought that they had a realistic chance to win the game. And look, they started off great. They ran the ball. Hey, what a novel idea. Pound the ball down their throat with David Montgomery leading the way. Find your tight ends. And it worked out in the first half. Were you concerned that the offense stalled in the second half? It just got a lot more chippy. The field got condensed. Goff had a horrific turnover in the game. But at the same time, I looked at it like, okay, the offense is kind of getting bogged down. The razzle-dazzle hook and ladder was great. It gave them some momentum. But I felt like at no point did I really feel concerned that the Cardinals were going to really get back into the game. I think outside of Harrison and their running back, I felt like, you know what? They don't have as much talent across the board as much as the Lions do, and it just kind of felt good to kind of be comfortable. It's like, okay, the Lions aren't scoring, but the defense is doing such a good job that you'd never really kind of felt like, wait a minute, you never really felt like the Cardinals were going to get into the game. And I just felt like the Lions just executed a game plan that was going to be effective for them. And I think that they've maybe done enough work to change their identity. Do you think the Lions are a defensive team now, Cuz?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the offense has not looked good the last 3 games, right? I think it's looked better against Arizona than it did against the Bucs, and the Bucs game looked, I guess, on par with the Rams game. I think the offense has been incredibly slow to start. Now, that being said,
yes,
I don't think the offense is going to be the shits all season. I just think right now the offense isn't operating at the efficiency that we expect, and I don't think the offense is living up to the expectation. That being said, I think the defense has surpassed what the offense is doing, and I think the identity of this team has now gone to a defensive-orientated team. You see a lot of the highlight packages. You hear a lot of the conversation about this team. It's not so much about Jared Goff, not so much about Amon-Ra St. Brown, not so much about Jameson Williams. It's not so much about the running back duo that I have some issues with the splits with. And we can get into that if you want to a little bit. It's up to you. But it is more about guys like Aiden Hutchinson. It's more packages highlighting Levi Onwuzurike. It's more conversations about Terrion Arnold. It's more Kirby Joseph with his interceptions and his turnovers. I think the identity of this team has shifted. And I think part of that is due to the defense being where it's at right now and it helping to win football games, or in certain circumstances, winning football games. I think and it also compounded with the offense being slow to take off. And look, I don't know what it is with the offense this year. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it needs to get 4 or 5 games underneath its belt to get going. I don't know if Sam Laporta is just that important to this offense, and him being hampered with injuries is the problem. I don't know if it's Jameson Williams having to get touches and them having more of a concerted effort to get him touches. I'm not sure what it is. I just know that the offense right now does not look like the same offense we had last year. And what I've watched and what I've paid attention to is kind of the momentum that goes with each drive. And we kind of touched on this a little bit last week. I think you need to have more of a concentrated effort with David Montgomery. I think he does a much better job of being that road grader and picking up yards than Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a special talent. I think he's going to be really, really good. But I don't think you need to just have a whole set of drives with just David Montgomery and then have a whole set of drives with Jahmyr Gibbs. You can kind of split that, mix that up. And look, I think part of this too is they're not unveiling everything, right? You slowly work things in. You're not throwing the entire kitchen sink out there, and the entire bathroom out there in the very first, week. You're going to work different plays, and you're going to work in different things that you've practiced as the season goes along. And I think as the season goes along, you'll see David Montgomery in the backfield. You'll probably see Jahmyr Gibbs split out as a slot receiver. My whole thing is you need to utilize these guys more on the field together, and I'd like to see these guys utilized more interchangeably on drives. I don't like seeing whole drives where it's just David Montgomery on the field. Then you take him off, and then defense is out there, and then you've got like a 7-minute drive with Jahmyr Gibbs. Next thing you know, it's been 10 minutes before David Montgomery's seen the field. He's got to get back into it. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like David Montgomery right now is your better running back. Jahmyr Gibbs, again, I feel like he's going to be incredibly special. But right now, I think you're getting more production out of a guy like David Montgomery. So I think the offense has to adjust, but definitely the identity of this team, I think, has shifted. And I think it is more of a defensive-orientated team than it was offensive like last year.
Yeah, and part of what you're seeing that's a concern is the passing attack is not crisp. And they're still working the chemistry. And you also see, too, that defenses are bringing pressure. They're taking away the middle of the field. They have some answers. So now the offense has to adjust to the adjustments made by the defense of the opponents. And that takes a little time. That's why you saw a little bit of razzle dazzle, the shake and bake, the hook and ladder. And that's what you got to do a little bit. And I do think the chemistry will get better. And that's just the way it is, because nowadays offensive football takes a little time for some teams to gel. And the first month of the season is considered the preseason for most teams, because none of the starters are playing. Now, I agree with you. I think that improvements can be made across the board on offense. The run game can be better. The usage of Gibbs and Montgomery together can be better. I think the blocking can be better. I think that the creativeness of the play calls of the run game can be better. I think they're sticking to kind of, they could use a little bit more draws or tosses, or sending the line to the right and then going to the left, a little bit more creativeness running the ball. So it'll get worked out. I think that you also are still developing. Remember too, guys, you do have 2 new pieces on that line. Jonah Jackson is a loss. Now, granted, he couldn't stay healthy for the Rams at this point in his early tenure there, but Zeitler's good, but it's still different than when you're working with, Penei was used to working with, somebody different on his right side. It's a change. So you look at it from the perspective of, okay, Penei also was dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury. It hasn't impacted him too much, but they're banged up. Frank Ragnow has not had his best start to the year. His performance against the Cardinals was better than it was against the Bucs, but at the same token, there are some factors you're seeing that's impacting the offense as a result of the roster change, differences, and really it is a combination of a lot of things. The passing attack not being exactly where it needs to be. And so for that, look, this is the blessing of having a defense that, hey, you can still get 2 wins even though you're not playing your best football. And that's a sign of a good football team. Hey, this defense can get better. But unfortunately, now we have to bring up the big concern with this football team, because it's a defensive team right now. I think you can trust Aaron Glenn to keep having this football team play and execute well on defense. But this game against the Cardinals left the Detroit Lions beaten, battered, broken at different spots. You lose Marcus Davenport for the season, and I know it upset a lot of people, but he had potential. I think he was worth the risk because of the depth that you had, and we'll talk about it, and I'll get your sense of how to replace him. I think that before, when multiple injuries would happen, you and I would panic and we'd be like, well, most likely it's going to end up hurting the team. The Lions still played pretty well with the plethora of injuries. The next man up mentality, you still expect them to compete at a high level. I'm curious to get your opinion on if it's going to impact them against the Seahawks. But Marcus Davenport is a loss, but I think the replacement with Pascal and Levi Onwuzurike and Wingo, 3 guys, and maybe including James Houston in the mix for some crumbs whenever you get a chance to get him in the mix, I think you got enough. I don't think you have to go outside right now. You have until the deadline to decide. I think you're going to be okay. Davenport was, look, guys, and I know it's tough when, and clearly, everybody said it. We've said it clearly here on the podcast. It's a risk when you bring in Davenport because he just can't stay healthy, and he didn't stay healthy. But it was a gamble because the Lions knew him. They knew his motor. They knew his size. They like guys that are more physical and can push back offensive linemen. It allows the linebackers to kind of do their thing in the secondary. So they just liked Marcus Davenport. They knew him. So they were willing to take a risk on him. And that was a Dan and Aaron suggestion. So if you're mad, that means you're mad at the coach and the defensive coordinator. It happened. It was vicious too. If you go in black, the guy literally, you can't prevent that. His arm's there and the guy literally took his right arm and chopped the elbow. How's Davenport supposed to stop that? You can't. So unless he wore a brace on his elbow, it just ripped the tricep because the guy literally chopped his tricep off the bone. And guys, this is football. This is not tiddlywinks. This is football. These guys are trying to hurt people. And that's what happened. I think that the injury there can be overcome. The one I'm concerned about that's going to probably impact what we just talked about, Frank Ragnow's partially torn pec what the fuck, cuz? The guy is crazy. I sent you the text. I said, dude, this guy partially tore his pec and still wanted to play and still wants to play against the Seahawks. What the hell is up with Frank Ragnow? The guy is sick in the head and he wants to get out there, but I think he's not going to be out there for the Seahawks, which probably makes Glasgow your center. But now you got to go to your depth, and that could cause a problem working Jared Goff's blind side. So how concerned are you with what you saw? Because, boy, they left Arizona with a win, but they left beaten up with Branch with a concussion. You lose Derek Barnes to a knee injury on IR for the next month minimum. You lose Davenport for the season. Ragnow's week to week. And Laporta has a low ankle sprain. So you're talking about 5-6 guys, which on average, cuz, I don't know if you saw this, but it came across my desk. Every single game that takes place in the NFL over the last couple of years, an average of 6 guys get hurt a game. 6 guys! And it's just tough because bigger, stronger, faster, and the field conditions aren't the best. How nervous are you regarding these injuries, and where do you think you're comfortable with the replacements?
So as far as Marcus Davenport goes, I'm not really concerned there, right? Like, I don't think you necessarily got a ton out of him.
Yeah, right.
And maybe I'm just being a little bit naive, but I just, look, when he was brought in, I didn't think it was going to be a great signing, and then kind of what we've gotten through 2.5 games, I was kind of like, okay, pretty underwhelmed. I think you've got enough depth up front where you'll be able to kind of offset his production. I think at some point when you get closer to the trade deadline, there'll probably be a move made. I think there'll be a couple of guys, a couple of free agents who might fit the bill for what this team is looking for, and you might be able to go out and grab another edge rusher, and it might not cost you a fortune. We'll see what happens there. I think the big injuries for me are Frank Ragnow, Derek Barnes, Sam Laporta. I think those injuries impact so much. Obviously, the offensive line is the strength of this team. You never really get to see the offensive line function as it's supposed to because Frank's always dealing with something. This guy now has a pec hanging on by a string. I know he wants to play. I think the best course is for him to not play against Seattle, take the bye week, and then maybe reevaluate and come back the following week and see kind of where it's at as far as being healthy and able to protect it. But he is so important because he's your center. He's got the relationship with Jared Goff. He is basically the guy who's in charge of pointing out and calling out coverages for that offensive line. The guy is so integral to what goes on with the offense as a whole that him being hurt, I think, pushes that back a little bit. And then you go to Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is kind of the X factor. We were counting him as the second wide receiver on this team at a certain point. And you've gotten little to no production from Sam Laporta thus far because he's been banged up with an injury that he rolled into the season with. Now you add on a low ankle sprain to it. It's just compounding injuries with this guy, and he's pretty beat up. So you're not getting the production that you would like out of Laporta, which I think slows down that offense, and we've already talked a little bit about how the offense has taken a couple of steps back. I think he is, when you really go back and you look at last year, I think he was a key cog in that offense being as explosive and as dynamic as it was. Underneath, you obviously have to count for St. Brown. You obviously have to count for Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. But Sam Laporta was another option, and he was a bigger version of a guy like St. Brown. He was a wider version. He had a bigger catch radius, and he was stronger. Not necessarily faster, but the guy was, especially in the red zone, was a key target for Jared Goff. And you look at some of the scoring issues and the inefficiencies in the red zone, I think it has to do with Sam Laporta being a little bit hampered. So I do have major concerns there. Again, I think he could be better coming out of the bye, but you really don't know. It's an ankle injury. You can only tape it up so much, and when you tape it up, that obviously is going to impact your performance as well. Derek Barnes, another one. Derek Barnes going on IR, and I know he's expected to come back later this season, but Derek Barnes, he's a guy who has really worked his way in to being a solid starter in this league. If you remember when Derek Barnes was drafted, we were kind of like, okay, I could see what they want to do with him, and I could see possibly getting some real good production out of him. And then he kind of had a little bit of an off rookie year, and his second year wasn't great. And then all of a sudden, he started putting the pieces together. He put the puzzle together, and this guy has been so impactful on that defense. There's a reason they only run 2 linebackers. There's a reason he's your number 2 linebacker. This guy is out there for all the right reasons, and he plays a hell of a football game. So him going down, I know that there are guys in that linebacking room who are going to step up and help solidify what he's leaving behind. But I think it's going to be a piece that is going to be sorely missed, and they will be excited when they get him back. But those are the big injuries for me. And look, this team is like the walking wounded right now. They are banged up all over the place. Don't discount what Amon-Ra St. Brown's going through, right? He had his ankle rolled up on not last week, but the week prior. So, all these guys, Brian Branch going through concussion protocol, all these things. There's all these guys that are just kind of the walking wounded headed into this Monday night game. I think the Monday night game comes at a good time. Get you an extra day, and then I think they head into the bye, and I think that early bye can really help this team come back a little bit more healthy. And hopefully, by the time we get into week 6 and 7, this team is firing on all cylinders.
All right, what's your thoughts on what's going to happen on Monday Night Football? All black Detroit Lions going to debut on Monday Night Football. They're all black uniform. I think it's going to be a fun, ruckus environment. It's going to be great to see Monday Night Football. I think it's going to be tough because this one might be the one where so far the first 3 weeks, I predicted the Lions to win. I just think for whatever reason, the Seahawks just have your number. And Zach Charbonnet is just going out of this world, pissing me off because I, like a dumbass, thought that Kenneth Walker was going to emerge. Maybe this week he comes back and helps me contribute in terms of my fantasy leagues after I took an L in our league. But I think that the Seahawks, for whatever reason, DK Metcalf, Geno Smith, they just have found a way to just pick apart Aaron Glenn's defense. So this is going to be a true test. I think it's going to be very tough. I could see this one going back and forth again to overtime. I don't know if it's going to be an offensive juggernaut performance. I think the Lions are going to tighten up defensively. I think it's going to be a 24-23 type game. But as we talk, I'm not as confident that the Lions, with all those injuries and everything going on, are just going to ball out and just show out. It's Monday Night Football, so you're going to see J-Mo do some things. But the injuries, man, when you got that many injuries, that typically in the NFL signifies loss. But this is different. It's not the same team. It's not the, Pete Carroll squad. This is the McDonald squad, but they've kind of kept it rolling, and they play very well. So I'm very curious to get your sense of how's this game going to shake out, because I kind of got a feeling it's going to be right now, 24-23 loss. It's going to be close, but I think that Seattle, for whatever reason, just has some success at Ford Field against the Lions.
Yeah, they somehow have a voodoo doll of a lion, and they just keep putting pins and needles in it all the time. Look, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not very confident on this game. For whatever reason, there is some witchcraft that is being done between the Lions and Seattle. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a very, very close game. I think what will happen, though, is Dan Campbell has a really good habit of doing this. He's going to use these injuries as something to help galvanize this team. I don't think this is going to be an offensive game at all. I think Detroit is going to play very tight defense, and I think what you're going to get out of Seattle is going to be a very tightly defended team as well. I see offense coming at a premium, and I think Detroit will just emerge ahead. I think they win on a Jake Bates field goal, and I think it'll probably be 23-21, with those points coming at an all-time high. I think this is going to be a tough game. This is with the injuries that they're coming in with, and with the deal with the devil that Seattle made. I think Detroit's going to have their hands full, but I think Monday Night Football, that place is going to be crazy. It's going to be loud. The all-black unis. I think it's going to be a fun night. I think they have enough in the tank to get the win and limp into the bye week and then get healthy there. So I think the Lions win this, but it is an incredibly close game.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Real fast, fair or foul. I don't know if you've heard the story about the UNLV quarterback. It's pretty sick. Everyone's talking about it. It involves NIL, money guaranteed, and kind of a debate regarding if the money was delivered. But basically, UNLV quarterback Matthew Sluka, senior, said that he was guaranteed $100K. And he said, that's what the recruiter told me. I'm getting my $100K. And I kept asking for it. I'm wondering where it's coming from. I kept asking. And when he said he only got $3K, he bounced. He quit on his team. And it's just caused a bunch of debate in the sports world, one of the biggest ones out there, because, look, if someone promises you money and you don't get it, that's a big problem. But to me, promises are promises. The only thing that gives you a leg to stand on is if you got that shit in writing. You got that shit in writing, you can probably sue. And you take it that way. But to quit on your team, I think it's going to be a bad thing for this kid. But you don't do it. You know, the other aspect is you don't do it unless you got some fat cash waiting around the corner next year. So that's the sick part of this. You can't knock the kid. I mean, clearly he feels hurt that the money wasn't guaranteed. It's gross to be talking about this with college, but these are things that are going to, it feels dirty. It just feels like that side of it shouldn't be happening. But he's a grown man, and he was promised something. But I think you have more of a leg to stand on if you have a contract and it's a deal. But I don't know if you should have quit. I mean, your team's undefeated. You're part of a team. This is not like work. You know what I mean? It's you're part of your role as the quarterback is the CEO of the team. And so to me, I wouldn't do that. I just would be like, simple. I'm just going to go on the Dion podcast. I'm going to go on Shannon Sharp. I'm going to sit with Shannon Sharp and be like, hey, Shannon, can I just say this? Eventually, UNLV would cave and someone would give him the money. I feel like doing it this way also adds the negative pressure to you that you're a quitter. So fair or foul, Matthew Sluka quitting. What do you think?
I don't like him quitting on his team. I was always raised to never quit on your team. I remember very vividly being in high school and just being overwhelmed with different things I had going on in high school. I had some family stuff going on at the time, and I was on the football team, and I had a lot of different stuff going on with school at the time, and just being like, Mom, I don't know how I'm going to prioritize all of this stuff. I'm not going to have the time to do all this. I was working at the time too. I had too much on my plate as a kid. And my mom being like, well,
tough shit.
Yeah, you can reevaluate everything at the end of the season. She's like, you have made a commitment to your team, and I know you're not a starter, because I was not a starter, but you are going to be there, and you're going to support your team, and you're going to do what's asked of you there, and you will figure out a way to get everything else to work. So I never believed in quitting on anything. So I'm with you on that. I think it is kind of shady what might have happened with this deal with UCLA or with UNLV. Again, if I was him, just kind of do what you're saying. Just kind of run to the media. Maybe set something up. Somebody's going to want to talk to you. Barstool will want to talk to you. Yeah. Go there. And what'll happen is you'll just put the pressure on UNLV. You'll end up getting what was promised to you, and you just keep it moving. So I'm of the same mindset as you. Yeah,
it's just gross to think about that. You got to compete. You got to buy. And it's just, ugh. But Michigan State had to buy Aiden Childs. I mean, that's the only way he's going to come here. With where he was at. So you take it and you understand that's part of it, but these are kids and you can't expect them always to make the right decisions and to think. But to hear the way it was reported, he got his agent involved and had to just, do his thing. It's like, I'm not sure the sporting world is ready for all that yet, but we'll figure it out. We'll see how it all plays out as the college football world figures out the new age of NIL and how programs are going to handle these youth that are trying to figure it all out. Cause that was a beautiful hour. I love breaking down the great stuff that's happening in Detroit sports. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Type in Detroit Sports Podcast anywhere you find your favorite audio content, and you'll find us all over the internet, spreading like a virus since 2013. And maybe now we can talk baseball in the mix with football this fall. Can't wait to fire it up next week on the latest episode of Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.